Good afternoon and welcome to the Industrial Product Finders webinar series. I am Pratap Padode, Editor-in-Chief of Industrial Product Finder and founder of ASAP Info Global Group, publishers of Construction World, Equipment India, Infrastructure Today, Indian Cement Review, Indian Textile Journal, among others. Industrial Product Finder, India's first and only industrial products sourcing magazine, also largest circulated and most authentic. Established in 1972, the magazine is the most preferred and trusted purchase tool of decision makers across companies and sectors. A true partner in the Make in India campaign, the magazine also has a robust digital presence with its website ipfonline.com. IPF has been the go-to source for over 8,000 procurement teams from leading companies across India. Let me show you some elements of this on your screen now. So yeah, so 48 years in running and provides information on 200 products across 38 verticals. That's the magazine. We also bring out an annual edition which has over 400 engineering products given across 30 odd industrial categories. And this time the theme is on India becoming a $1 trillion manufacturing economy and overcoming global disruptions. I think this disruption of the COVID-19 was not foreseen by us, let me admit, but I'm sure with the kind of disruptions people have spoken about, it may make a good read. This magazine has been circulated to various public sector corporations, etc., which are mandated to buy 25%, procure 25% from MSMEs. You can look at the a deal to buy this annual issue on ipfonline.com/subscribe. Here are some of the stories that we have shared in the past, and you can see it's quite a range for the manufacturing industry. Its audience profile, as you can see, interestingly, we draw around 35% of our web traffic from overseas. Yes, there are importers seeking products from our website. Nearly 35% traffic comes from overseas. We also offer digital services, which are for social media and for lead generation, especially geared to meeting the needs of MSMEs. And you can contact Priyanka at asapinfoglobal.com for this. Let me introduce our panelists. We have, and I'm naming them alphabetically, Mr. Lalit Gabhane, Director General, National Safety Council, Professor R. Jayaraman from Jain Institute of Management, Mr. Saxena, Founder and CEO, LogisticsNow, Mr. Vijayanand Choudhury, Global Head Procurement, Tata Technologies, and Dr. Vinod Nowal, Deputy Managing Director, JSW Steel. So 4th May has come, and all industry and companies are gearing to move and get going, but there are lots of challenges. One, we already had a situation where so many trucks were already on dispatch mode during the time in the mid of March, where most of the companies do a whole lot of business towards the end of the year. They got stranded at multiple locations with stock, not having workers to offload, or not having reached their destination somewhere midway. They need to reach their destinations, get to offload, get to invoice, get to collect the monies. All this is right now at a stalemate position. That needs to move. Then comes the situation of, can we manufacture more and get our plants moving? So then the challenges of what protocol needs to be followed, what are the safety measures, What are the implications? Do we have the demand? How are we going to plan this whole thing? All these questions are coming up. But we see that although essential services like steel and pharma, among others, were already continuing operations, but now sectors such as automobiles, consumer durables, liquor, and electronics have also started making moves to open up. Some have mandated that government's Arogya Setu app should be utilized. Companies like Maruti have got their own app, but states have received, like Maharashtra has received over 15,000 applications for reopening, and nearly 4,000 have begun operations. Government offices have opened countrywide too. But the situation is quite alarming, and I must share this slide with you. This you can see how badly off our purchase index is. This index is the lowest since it began in 2005. It's just dropped like a free fall. Obviously, after March, there has been a lockdown, so you can see the free fall of the index, and that gives us the jitters. So before we go on to address the agenda, I would like to take a sense of the house. And for this, we will have a audience poll question. The audience has, the question in the panel, and they have options. So there are 5 options given, which is the biggest challenge in restarting manufacturing activity. And the 5 options are infection of workers, non-availability of workmen, and I'll share my screen. Non-availability of workmen, non-availability of raw materials, lack of demand, or financial liquidity. You got to choose one. Which do you think is the biggest challenge? And we will know the answer in a minute or less than that. I think voting has already begun. We will just wait for a few seconds more. Just a few seconds. Okay, I think we are getting non-availability of workmen and financial liquidity being the 2 biggest areas of concern, followed immediately by lack of demand. So non-availability of workmen definitely is a big challenge right now. Financial liquidities or lack of demand are near about equal. These are the biggest challenges being faced. Now let's get on to the let's go to the panel and let's start the questions. So I'd like to start with Mr. Lalit Gabhane. Mr. Gabhane, would you come in and tell us what precautions are being advocated by guidelines when restarting the manufacturing process?
Hi, good evening to all of you, and let me first thank Mr. Pratap for inviting me to participate in this panel. Coming to the question, what guidelines for manufacturing? As we have said, we have just now seen in the poll, manufacturing, I mean, there are going to be challenges because of various factors, but in spite of whatever the challenges, the manufacturing has to start, otherwise the supply of goods will get very badly hampered. So the challenges, yes, the manufacturers will have to take all those precautions like social distancing, sanitization of the premises, building the trust of the employees to come to the workplace, because today everybody is really afraid that if I touch something, I may get infected. That is the kind of scenario we are in today. So getting back and building the trust is going to be very important for the manufacturers. Now let us start from the precautions which the manufacturers need to take. Let us start from the factory gate or the various operations. For every operations, they will have to perform the risk assessment. Where is the risk of infection? Where is the risk of contamination? Can that activity be substituted, or any alternate solution be made available? So these are the challenges manufacturers are going to face. And while replacing certain activities, definitely there is going to be a impact on the productivity. The training will play a very, very important important role. The people will have to be trained in the revised SOPs. The SOPs which you had yesterday are not going to work today because of social distancing, sanitization, and use of personal protective equipment. So with all these restrictions, the people may not feel very free to work like what they were doing till yesterday. So these are the challenges which are going to be there for the manufacturers. So the guidelines are like, if you find somebody some symptomatic case, you must immediately report. Should not allow the person to get in. Maybe you may have to make some temporary stay arrangement for the people who are not able to go back home because their area is infected, and you need them at your workplace because the manufacturing has to go. So these are the kind of arrangements the companies will have to make. Over to you, Pratap.
Right. I think there are, SOPs for each and every industry sector-wise, depending upon what their manufacturing processes and what are their externalities and inwardings, etc. All will determine how you need to plan your process, and SOPs for probably different manufacturing process may be different. Let me come to a live example. Dr. Vinod Nowal, who's Deputy MD of JSW Steel. Now, steel has been an essential commodity, and I understand that steel has been being exported already, including to countries like China during this time when the pandemic has been on. So let's go to Dr. Vinod Nowal, who can share with us what challenges he has faced in getting this plant going. Dr. Nowal, over to you.
Very good evening to everyone. Mr. Pratap, thank you very much for inviting me for this seminar. Believe me, when Mr. Modi has announced the nationwide lockdown, even the steel industry scenario was no exception and entered in a state of shock. Let me tell you that steel technology is not based on that which you can on and off. Of rather, steel plants need continuous, the round-the-clock operations, especially in area of like blast furnace, Corex technology, and coke ovens. Mostly steel plant, they are going to have this type of the technology. It needs continuous operations, and if the plant operations halt in such a critical time, it takes at least 3 to 6 months time to restart or resume the production. And there was a very big challenge for us when we had decided to switch off everything on 24th of the March. And that was a big challenge for our industry, how we can do this. Because on a particular day, we were producing 34,000 tons every day production in our Karnataka plant out of 7 locations. I'm just giving example of the one of the plant, and 34,000 we have gone down to 1/4 of the operations, and we have put almost 20,000 people. We have to send them home, and most of them, we ask them to operate from the home. And 10,000 people, we were working on projects, various projects, and put all the people in the home, and we have to maintain the protocol which is required for the COVID protocol. Then very difficult to manage this type of the challenge, such a large manpower required for industry, and the maintain the guidelines of the Home Ministry how to do the protocol of the COVID, and especially in the steel plant, because the people are very much, adhere how to put the mask, because every day put the mask, and every day we are in the PP. That was not a big challenge for us, but major challenge was how manage with a very lean type of the manpower to operations. That was a major issues. Especially now the truckers operations has started. We are operating around, say, with the 40 to 50% of the manpower, and with this type of the manpower, we have to take care of the total operation activities. And by coming, just a minute, there is some disturbance in my system.
Yeah, we can hear you. Don't worry.
So now biggest challenge for us is when people are coming with the material from throughout India by the raw material flexes or spares. And when they will come inside the plant is going to be a big challenge for us. Though we have managed, like for sanitization, we have to put the tunnels, they have to come from the tunnel. We are keeping how to digitize the working, keep distance from operations, and we have the facilities to do the thermal screening also. But there is a panic among the employees. So this is the one of the biggest challenge for us now.
So like you mentioned, Dr. Nowal, that when you have inward material coming in, that becomes a factor where you have unknown elements entering your plant, and therefore there has to be some sort of a containment zone created in that area itself. Is that something that you all have already been through, or is that something that you are planning for now?
No, already we planned actually. Now because market has opened, industries, we are expecting actually industry start sending this raw material for us, except iron ore. In any case, we are getting close by pipe conveyor. But the material by raw material consumers will come by trucks. And after this 4th of April, market is open up. So there will be again a challenge. So far, whatever employees we are having, around 40-50% of our manpower, you can say around 10,000 people, they are in-house in our colonies, and we don't have any such case actually so far. So we are maintaining it, but it's a big challenge.
Right. So against a normal workforce of 30,000, you are working with around 10,000 currently. Am I correct?
Yes.
And therefore, the biggest challenge is to work with the lean staff. Is what you're?
The one is the lean staff is one of the problem. How to achieve it? That is the one problem. Second is we depend on the spares, depend on the some of the raw material that has to come from various states. And when the people will start coming inside, then how we can keep intact this environment? This is another challenge. Right. Third challenge is a market.
Of course, we'll come to that. So let me now move to Raj Saxena. You were mentioning around 5 million truckers are plus their helpers, etc. are possible infection carriers because in case they are not being tested or whatever, there is a chance, and they are coming into people's factories. I mean, there are huge concerns on how do we control that. How serious is this, Raj?
Pratap, thanks for the question and for having me on this webinar. Thankfully, so far, there have not been a whole lot of cases reported from truck drivers in plants. But that we have to take with the necessary precaution, which Dr. Nowal also mentioned. It is a good starting point that a lot of plants are now doing thermal screening. Almost every major plant is now screening drivers thermally. Plus, there is precautions of social distancing, of wearing masks, of sanitizing, etc., which are happening at many of the major plants. the concern still remains that if we do a thermal screening, the patient can be asymptomatic, and that can be for as long as 14 days. And in those 14 days, a typical long-haul truck driver can probably visit at least 2 to 3 plants, if not more. So unless the thermal scanning will work, provided the asymptomatic phase is passed. But in that asymptomatic phase, it becomes a little more challenging, which is where social distancing and wearing masks and enforcing these COVID-19 protocols becomes very important. And it is easier said than done, because we are talking about thousands of trucks moving in and out of large plants like the one Mr. Nowal heads, and from any major production facility. It is a challenge. In addition to this, I think that the opportunity lies at 2 different levels. While there are thousands of trucks which are moving, the opportunity for us to take the precautions which Mr. Lalit Gabhane also highlighted in terms of the inwarding process, and what Mr. Choudhury had also mentioned earlier, that the inwarding process needs to be well thought through, so that the risk of contamination from the drivers slash helpers as well as from the cargo is minimized. Yeah, and this doesn't start with the truck. The answer possibly starts with the planning part at corporates. And thankfully, because the planning and the necessary basic precautions are in place at most plants, there isn't a widespread a spread which is seen in the driver community so far. I'll add to that two aspects become important. One is planning at the corporate level for any major organization to ensure that trucks and drivers are not standing within the premise or even outside in containment zones for any significant duration of time. And second, the necessary precautions which also just got highlighted at a plant level. And both these in combination can help us reduce the risk of any large-scale infection through logistics as a carrier.
Right. And there are companies like Panasonic and some other consumer durables. They are already planning this kind of a containment zone when goods from external sources are brought into the factory premises, and then they're kept there for a certain time, and they are disinfected suitably with whatever process they are undertaking before they take them in. But I want to go to Professor Jayaraman now. What is the right strategy for handling logistics and warehouse management in a scenario like this? I mean, we have so far planned and differently. We've had large scale logistics operations now commencing in our country, but now with this whole new crisis, Professor Jayaraman, what do you think?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Mr. Padode, for inviting me on this. It's a great pleasure to be here. We will take a look at it in 2 parts. Saxena has already dealt in some detail on the logistics. In terms of warehousing, what I would think is, of course, there are many shapes and sizes of warehouses. But first of all warehouses must pay immediate attention to hygiene and disinfection. Now, what we mean is that make sure the place is clean and neat. They have to do maybe this, they may not have done in the past at all. And maybe now they need to do it. Maybe get some drugs of soap water if you don't have sanitizers, and make sure that people dip into it once in a while. Second is they need to divide their warehouse into maybe 3 or 4 zones. One is the internal zone, which is completely kept out. To the extent possible, keep it out of the warehouse and receive trucks outside. Make sure that a check is done, the temperature test is done, and perhaps in terms of logistics, the truckers can carry a COVID-free certificate. That needs to be updated from time to time. Whenever they get the latest check done, somebody can say he has been checked and this truck is free of COVID. That's another thing. The third thing to be done is that all warehouses must now start using implements. Lots of tools and tackles. Earlier, whatever they were doing, movements with the hand, now they should for some time try and do these things, movements with using tools and tackles. For that, they should go and get something from the market. Maybe if needed, design some light tools and tackles, which they can use so that the no-touch policy can be implemented. It's no good just thinking about and saying that no-touch is good, but then how do you implement it? So you need to also maybe buy some light forklift trucks which can pick up light loads. move it fast so that and go through small spaces as well. So this is another thing. Then in the what we mean by 3 zones, one is receiving, one is storage. The third zone is specifically, I think it is what I would call it as a cooperative third zone. No single warehouse can probably do it alone, but if they can cooperate with a group of, I've seen like Railroad or various other places, wherever there are warehouses, they are in groups. So I think these groups get together and have a medical team. That should be resident in the complex, may not in individual warehouses, but in the complex they should be there. And that will provide, you mentioned about trust. Now when people see some doctor and some medical looking people, they will say, हाँ भाई यहाँ कुछ मिलेगा, यहाँ कोई खतरा नहीं है. So that is something which they need to do, and they must have this in either a cooperative way or individual. And lastly, I think all warehouses must improve their information and communications. So they should keep track who got what, who is the person, which truck number is okay, which truck number is not okay. Out of 100 trucks coming in, 1 or 2 are infected. And this kind of a data must be shared. If that is done, I think the warehousing sector will have done its job. And logistics, I think Professor Saxena has already said a lot.
Right. No, that's a good list of points that you suggested. I'll also like Raj to add. Raj, would you like to add something here?
Certainly. Thanks, Professor Jayaraman. That was a very interesting point about warehousing. On the transport side, I'll just highlight, add to a thought which Professor Jayaraman mentioned in terms of communication, and cannot overemphasize that communication is as important as the actual precaution on the ground that is being taken. And this is communication not within a company alone. About a month back, we had recommended the creation of a national registry of truck drivers, where precisely the idea of if there is a truck and a driver combined, which is known to be free of COVID through a test or through observation, then that is a certificate which can be provided and can be renewed every 7 days, every 15 days, and so on and so forth, so that the if that certificate is there, it gives comfort to a plant to invert that truck. In the absence of that certificate, the plant has the onus of the additional precautions that they need to take. More importantly, from a truck registry, or let's say a national registry of truck drivers, will also enable you to observe the recurrence of a driver and the pattern of movement of a driver across plants over time. So that, and this is not to do with just the current pandemic, because pandemics will come, few years, something else will come. But if we have this integrated information about truck drivers in a centralized central government possibly database, it enables plants to leverage it and get information about the safety aspect of that particular truck driver and truck. And this goes slightly beyond our current conversation, but the essential idea is digitizing information at a large scale, so that it is beneficial to a JSW, it is beneficial to a company X, company Y, and collectively we also feed into that. So if a positive case is found in a truck, it gets reported into that national registry, which would be a huge service to another company, set of companies also. So Pratap, with that, over to you.
Yeah. So Raj, what you're suggesting is actually partly happening, because if Arogya Setu is the mandated app that everybody needs to download, and all companies and all public sector, government offices, etc., all are being now mandated that they must have, and it might become conditional that you will not be allowed unless and until you have that app on you. Then automatically maybe all these Arogya Setu app downloads of the truck driving industry could be all categorized into one, and you could already be doing this. So it's what you're saying is not something which is very far off, possible to have.
Sure.
Okay, I'd like to now move to Mr. Choudhury. Mr. Choudhury, can you comment on what kind of process planning changes we need to bring about to introduce a contact-free environment? Because we are increasingly seeing that, how do you make this contact-free? Professor Jayaraman also suggested that use of forklift trucks, etc., automation. But we'll come to automation later. But however, what kind of a process planning is needed?
Right. So first of all, thanks, and I'm quite glad to be on this particular forum. From a planning standpoint, at this point in time, we all have got enough information about how do we manage this COVID-19 situation. This situation is to be managed is that the spread of the disease should not happen. That's it. And second, if someone is identified, he has to be quarantined. These are the only two things. Otherwise there is nothing called prevention, cure, or anything of that sort is not there, right? So now, A is in terms of spreading, it is very clear that social distancing needs to be maintained. Now, in terms of planning within the organizations, at each and every place where the employee is going through or is stationed and performing his job, and how he's exiting that particular work area is all to be well thought through, and it should be well planned. Now, for example, as simple as you pointed out, that everyone who's coming into the office should at least show up with a Arogya Setu app, which tells that he is safe. I mean, that's the basic thing that one can ask. Now, we may trust, we may not trust, that's a different story. But here, we all have to go and follow that particular process, trusting that, yes, that helps. And the second one is there's a thermal scanning that would take place. And then he moves in, and now there is a tunnel which people are trying to use. There are good things about it, bad things about it. Not, but please ask the employee at least to sanitize his open body parts in terms of cleaning up his hands or whatever. And there are so many videos that are coming in where you not even touch the sanitizer bottle, you can touch it with your foot and it works, right? Simple thing, right? Now, imagine the first thing that he gets into the particular office complex, and there's a door which opens towards himself. He has to just pull the door, right? If he has to pull the door, he's touching his hands, which many other people will touch and again wash and clean. So simple things like there should not be pull doors anymore, right? Max, you can have a push door, which he has to push through it with his shoulder. Otherwise, just keep the door open, because there's no more point in keeping shut doors and expecting employees. That's a basic. I mean, I'm to give you certain basics where a person can think about, because each plant is unique on its own. Each plant setup and work line is unique on its own, right? So now, for example, simple thing, you go to a washroom, and if there's a tap which one has to open with his hands, first thing the company should think is do a sensor-based tap going forward, right? And similarly, if you go to a work line where it's a typical assembly shop, and there's a conveyor belt kind of a mechanism that is working on, the people should wear gloves and have to work you wearing the gloves. But as soon as they are exiting that particular plant, they should just remove the gloves and throw it, right? And as they get in, they sanitize their hands and they wear the gloves. That is where the security guard should stand and monitor that. Gone are the days when the security has to monitor of any theft or anything, because nowadays thieves are very less, because they are also scared of touching anything. Right? So the planning has to be very clean and clear in terms of thinking where is the employee moving, how socially distanced they are, and certain things are the employees need to be well communicated about the rules and processes. That manual has to be done. If that manual is not done, employee will think, yes, I have to do things, and then keep flouting some of the rules. For example, typical in a IT scenario, or a typical support function, or a HR area or a finance area of a particular office, he's going and meeting some of the banking boys and some office boys who come from outside, and may not follow the precaution, but that person is sitting at a distance which is less than a meter, where the government says 6 feet, which is as good as 2 meters, but he's sitting close to a meter and keep touching all over things in and around. And I think that should be avoided. People should be told that no, you're not supposed to. You're supposed to work within your defined area and perform your job and then move out. And similarly, the place where people have food, a place where they have tea or coffee or something, everything needs to be well thought about, well drafted, and process to be written. Process should be printed and pasted at various points so that the employees can see that and follow that particular process. So that everything is there in the mind as and where the employee moves within the office. That kind of a planning is very important. Now, the other things are, as a good practice, most of the companies are making manuals saying what the employees should do when they leave the office and when they leave home, what they should be doing, like they should be cleaning up their clothes, they should not repeat the clothes, they should keep the clothes away from the family and wash them first. So there are many other things which every company is coming up with a different kind of a manual video, which is well out there on the internet. So a company has to customize for their own and go ahead and put up a process note, communicate this not only to the internal stakeholders, but also to the external stakeholders who are coming in, and the whole planning process is in place. Unless we plan for it, unless we view and see that where all someone is touching, someone came up with this beautiful thing that, the tap thing. It was an eye opener. Earlier, we used to have sensor-based tap only in food areas, where so that people food, if they want to wash hands, they will not have to touch the tap. But generally, in other toilets, it was a thing. So there are very different mechanisms to think how far we can go and what we
Right.
have to do. Going forward, personal devices are more important. Personal tools are more important. Like, I would not love to use someone else's tools on a workflow or someone else's device. Sharing of devices should be avoided. So those are the various things, aspects where we need to observe and plan for before we go and open up the shops for working.
Right, right, Mr. Choudhury. I think, I think what you're saying is, first of all, you must have a process audit to see what kind of a process your industry is following, and therefore, what are the points at which either people are going to interchange, and therefore a disinfecting kind of a activity needs to be taking place. Let's say it's the same machine being used in different shifts by different people, which are the places where they're going to get together, and therefore can we use some, either it's voice activated or like sensor based faucets, and kind of things like that, which are minor in maybe some expense in terms of automation, but maybe minor, may not be necessarily very expensive to implement. But there was no need to do so far, so it was going on like that. But now, to enable a contact free environment, this might be needed. Let's go to Dr. Nowal and see what have they been, if they had to introduce or make some changes on in their floor plan, in their design, in their approach process, in order to accommodate this challenge. Dr. Nowal, please.
Yeah, I fully agree with Mr. Vijayakumar. And whatever practices we have adopted for JSW Steel, I would like to share of that. And basically, that is more on the system-based changes. And it is very difficult actually in our sector, where the labor intensity is very, very high and very difficult to ensure it in the entirety. But we have to target a minimum contact-free engagement in our plants. Every outsider has to pass through the sanitizing tunnel, thermal screening, and maintain the stringent social distancing norms as far as possible. Also, the work from home policy was introduced. So 30 to 40% people has to work from the home. And first day itself, biometric punch using thumb impression has been withdrawn. And now we are working towards introducing a robust system which will capture face image and parallelly perform thermal sensing for the employee when enter into the plant. Digitization was implemented in words and spread, and we are giving more and more emphasis now on zero paper movement, especially when the truckers bringing the papers, the people, they should not immediately touch the paper, and how we can avoid they come in contact with the outsiders, and use as much maximum possible utilization of the virtual technology which we are doing today. instead of meeting, having face-to-face or sitting in the boardrooms and talking. In our 20 canteens, social distancing for distributing the food is followed strictly through the staggered timings and restructured sitting arrangements. So they should not be very closely sit and eat. One more thing I want to share on preparations of the COVID, how to handle it. So we are having a 150 bed super specialty hospital in collaboration with Naran Herdale, and that has converted into COVID-19 facility to face the emergency. And we have put even 30 ventilators, and it is fully equipped. Even we have created a 500 bed emergency isolation center. If any emergency happens, not in our plant, but society around also, we can take care of that. So this type of the preparations we are doing, and we are, give the confidence to our employees, which they have the panic. If we will touch anything, they will get the coronavirus. So that is very much required to keep them motivated. So they should work, and if we will not work, then people will die with hunger. So that is also very much required. We know it actually, situation is very bad, very panic, but we have to work.
So, obviously we have to work. I think we have seen the PMI index crash completely, and we have to make the engines of the economy and we have to crank them up. But, there was a lot of fear about the fact that if a case is detected in your plant, there are penal provisions in the Disaster Management Act, etc. So, but of course, it was later clarified that no infection is going to get your plant closed for 3 months as it was rumored. So, but are there any penalties in case there are infections detected, or what is the government saying in terms of guidelines in case there is an infection in a plant? I mean, do you have to shut down for 14 days, or is it okay to just isolate that person and the person he has been in touch with, quarantine them? What are the guidelines? Mr. Gabhane, do you have any idea on this?
I'm not aware of any such guideline issued that if a case is found in your factory, then the plant has to be shut or something. First of all, most of the plants were shut for last many days. But yes, if after the restart, if the plants are not taking the adequate safety and hygiene precautions, and the local authorities like factory inspector or local, the health inspector, if they visit the factory, they have the powers to, recommend certain actions against the occupier. If the government has advised you to maintain social distance, to provide the PPEs, everybody must come with the mask, and should not, there should not be any crowding. And if you are not educating people, if there is no display of safety instructions and things like that, these inspectors might give their recommendations against the factory which they visit. So it's all the more important, and it's in the social interest, not just to escape out of some factory inspector or a health inspector, but it's in the larger interest that whatever maximum we can do to prevent the spread, we must do that. As Mr. Nowal said, and Mr. Choudhury also said a few minutes back, that each activity in the manufacturing unit has to be assessed, has to be the risk needs to be found out what exactly is there, and then how we change that process so that there is minimum contact between two people, or then there is no need of two people coming together to perform that job. Simple example, like closing of the door. Let's keep the doors open wherever we can, or convert them to make openable in the direction of your escape. So these are all the simple things. We need to revisit our processes and take whatever maximum precautions we can take. work from home, yes, it's a good idea. It is helping particularly the IT industry and all, but for every manufacturing operation, it may not help. Certain staff will have to come for the work. So when they come for the work, the precautions which need to be observed will have to be observed. The hygiene, the industrial hygiene is going to play a big role in the day, in the days to come. So while there is no such directive that if a case is found out in your factory will be shut or the occupier will be penalized. It's in the larger interest that we all should be proactively take the necessary measures, because ultimately the inspectors will come for their regular inspection and they have the powers to point out if they find in their expert opinion, if they point out that something is going which is not in favor of health and safety of a worker, that they might report to the higher, they might take appropriate action against the occupier. Pratap.
So unlike previous, strictures and guidelines which used to be given by these factory inspectors, here are the guidelines which are actually for safety sake of the employer and the employees of the same company. So it's in their interest to follow. So yeah, they should follow. But we were conducting another webinar earlier, and I was told a lot of innovation is taking place in the field of even figuring out which are infected people. There are drones which are now able to scan a large crowd of people and be able to detect through remote the infra and using of infra thermometers in a remote manner from drones, detect those people who have temperatures within a crowd. So, and these kind of innovations are being developed in startups in Bangalore and things like that. So there is a lot of work going on simultaneously, and you might be surprised by the kind of innovation and automation that comes about now, because necessity is the mother of invention, and everybody is going to apply their minds into how to, the India's jugaad has to now come into action to see how we can beat this. So let me go over to Vijayanand. Is there a case for increase in automation in industrial plants and logistics? I'm sure there is, but can you sort of tell us what typically is you see the way forward in taking place in this?
Right. So, this is a very interesting question, and when I was thinking of this particular seminar in the night yesterday, I got one of my friends working in McKinsey in the US, and I got a question from him. And his question was that how the new age world retail operations would look like if you're running a supermarket, because in the Western regions, the supermarkets are very huge, and and the shops are very few. So obviously there's a good amount of people visiting it. Now this takes me to a different thinking that a few years back or a few months back, there was this big question roaming around saying whether AI and machine learning will take jobs away. But I can assure social distancing will take some jobs away, right? So when it says social distancing, it is very clear now that within a certain square feet, if there were a set of working, now only near about 1/3 of it can work, right? So rest of it will have to perform their operations from a different place. So obviously, if it has to be a different place, and a lot of digitization needs to take place. Now, I give you a simple example. Infrared cameras were earlier used for different purposes, but now infrared video cameras will go and do thermal checking, right? Now in a workflow plant, there would be a simple thing that I walk in and there were no sensor-based lighting. And sensor-based lighting and IoT energy conservation, and then how the data feeds in, how the machine will learn, and when the lights will come on. That is a big thing that we were talking a few months back. Now it is reality. You have to do it because employees will not love to switch on something, right? Similarly, automation, robotics. was earlier, whether should I implement or not? What is the capex I need to invest? How will I recover that particular capex? Now, with the social distancing, the automation plant is forced to go and put robotics. Now, people will really have a sense of pride, saying there are only 5 people in the assembly line and not 45 or 50 people. So there would be a lot of IoT based, digital based, and remote technologies that would come into play. And like as you rightly said, using the word jugaad, earlier these technologies when they were being introduced into the marketplace, into from a education to an implementation, everything was thought about as, yeah, this will come when it will come, this has to work in a certain way. Then people will say that come up with new ideas, data should remain within the data server, it has to not go out of India.
Right.
So various
Right.
other security labs, so many question marks were there, but today everything is washed.
It's got
You have
accelerated
to
now. Right.
you have to just adopt it, you have to make it quick, you have to make it happen.
Right. Okay, let me ask Professor Jayaraman also if he has any. Do you see how this automation coming in, and in what form particularly? Is it just going to be because as an outcome of lack of availability of labor, like Mr. Choudhury was pointing out, because that's forced upon you, or are there going to be some other such measures which people might take?
No, I don't think automation has got anything to do with COVID. COVID or otherwise, automation will come. Industry 4.0 is definitely coming, and it's not simply because of social distancing and so on. These are certainly in favor of automation. So if we look at two different types of automation, for example, one I saw only about 2 years back in the retail industry, where I saw a German plant which is designed for about a 150. This plant was designed to, from a distribution center, it will pick up all the items, pack it, put it into crates, and load it into the truck. That was the human intervention. So this is really a plant which does the nitty-gritty of what all many laborers used to do. So this is one type of automation where the human intervention is completely not there, not because they don't want them to do it, but they think this plant does things more efficiently, and the supporting level of automation has also come to that level. The other type of automation which has been there for several years is the SCADA, the supervisory control systems, data acquisition and controls. Now, this is something which industrial plants will have to do on a much larger scale than what has been practiced. So the SCADA, for example, refineries are fully run by SCADA. The blast furnace in a steel plant and several other facilities are run, but it's not enough. The opportunities for interlinking and making sure that you can link various processes and run them far more efficiently. So this is the other type of automation that will definitely come. Of course, the third type of automation is the productivity related automation. Now that is something which works on improved accuracy. So recently there was a great example of solar coil where they demonstrated and they were producing a product which now, using self-corrective measures through automation, can improve the productivity very substantially. So these will come, no matter what.
All right. Okay, Professor Jayaraman, we will now go to our next audience poll question. We will want to see what the audience feels about the demand factor, which everybody has said that that's another big challenge. I think Dr. Nowal also mentioned, and some others on the panel. So you can see for best ways of generating demand. Options are government should increase procurement for MSMEs, which they are mandated to do. Government should spend on infrastructure. Government should incentivize exports, or government should release dues of refunds, taxes, etc., which have been held back for so long, or will make available loans at very low interest rates for industry. You got to choose which is the best way of generating demand out of these 5 options? It's on your panel. Please choose. And we will wait for your answer. The voting has begun. So currently, yes, procurement mandate from MSME is 25%. Government has also stepped up a big infrastructure plan. Exports also needs to be, so go to see everything is really needed, but you got to choose the one that you feel is the most important one. Right. So I think now we have the answers. 31% of the audience feel that government should increase procurement from MSMEs. 26% feel government should spend on infrastructure. And the third best option is availability of loans at very low interest rates. So yeah, that is the sense that we are getting from people. And let's move on to the next challenges. I think I'll just go quickly as we are going to be running out of time. So I want each panelist to name one challenge in the field that I would like him to address. So let's say procurement. Mr. Choudhury, what do you say is the one big challenge in procurement?
Yeah, so I would view this particular question as a more of an economic question than a procurement question, because if people stop spending, then obviously demand is not going to come in. People stop spending when such times come in. Obviously, people will stop spending because they're very much not secured about tomorrow and they have to conserve the cash for today. And in such a scenario, that's why a typical old economics saying is that, you know, when in such times government has to spend more so that it creates a job scenario at the marketplace. So obviously, when government has to spend more, government should go ahead and take care of all kinds of industries, and obviously the priority should be MSME. And the second one.
So what's the challenge? What is the challenge?
So the challenge here is that the government itself is trying to control spending, just like a employee or just like a citizen of the country, right? I feel the government should pick up more projects, and I would not be shy to say that the government, which was planning to spend a lot in good times, it has to think about twice as much during the bad times and create.
So government budgets for procurement should be more, is what you're saying?
Yeah, procurement should be more. Government should plan proper projects that will also generate tomorrow's income, and those projects procurement should be obviously through MSMEs. The other part is government should always believe to see.
But just one, Mr. Choudhury, we're running short of time,
right,
so
okay.
I'd like just one challenge.
Right.
Dr. Nowal, on procurement, what would you say is a challenge?
Mr. Pratap, according to me, the biggest challenge is to retain these migrant laborers. Okay. These are the people, they are maintaining the productivity of the small scales and medium scale. And these two sectors are creating the demand. And if suppose they are not fully in working conditions, very difficult actually to support the economy. Let's suppose a steel plant in my company, all these small scales, medium scale, they create the demand and then we produce. As on today, we have totally moved to exports because we have more than 100 countries of presence and we are exporting 70% of our product. But this is not a permanent solution. We depend on domestic demand, and demand will come when these labors will continue to be in the industry. That is the biggest challenge for whether industry or with the government. And if we ignore and they move, they will take 6 months to come back, and 6 months will delay. It will be a big impact.
Right. Raj, what do you think is the biggest challenge?
So as manufacturing capacities start ramping up across the country, the availability of logistics to support them seamlessly in a safe and cost-effective fashion, because there will be tremendous cost pressure and also availability pressure in different pockets of the country. Starting from March 24th, when the network broke down in transportation, to today, when the network is partially running at, let's say, 20 to 40% capacity in different parts of the country, this matching to the production ramp up in a way which enables cost-effective logistics is a challenge, and there are innovative ways which have been already used in this. So, for instance, partnerships between companies, where if a truck goes from Bangalore to Gujarat, and from Gujarat another company sends it back to Bangalore, what we call the backhauling piece of it, this has already started in India. And many major companies are already on board. They're doing this, and we happily support such innovative constructs, which not only ensures the cost effectiveness, but also the safety of drivers, because the truck is running continuously between reputed organizations with the necessary SOPs for ensuring safety of the product and the driver in place at both ends. And this is just one example. When companies start coming together, we can obviously depend on the government. At the same time, when companies start coming together and doing things innovatively, whether it is sharing SOPs, sharing trucks, sharing capacities, and more importantly, sharing plans, integration, absolutely, integration at an ecosystem level. When we start doing that, suddenly, we would have built a foundation much stronger than we have had in the past, more cost effective and safer for our people also.
Right. Okay. Professor Jayaraman, what is your view? What is the biggest challenge?
I think going forward, at least for the next 6 months and probably further, biggest challenge is coordinated approach. If
Sorry?
the time coordinated approach. So for example, if I'm a big company, I would really not worry too much about who my suppliers are. I know that they will keep supplying, that is not a problem. The truckers will place the trucks, not a problem. They will come, load, unload, the warehouse will work and so on. But now that is not going to work. We need to make sure that we establish very good communication with our suppliers, especially on the new processes that need to be put in. And constant communication and coordinated working so that they know a lot and how a lot of transparency will help people in knowing what exactly is required. And I think more and more this will lead to just-in-time kind of supplies, and it will lead to lesser waste, but more importantly, it will keep them running. People are not thinking that there will be a second wave and a third wave. What happens then? So that is a question which we need to address. So we need to keep in mind, we start something, but we also make sure that this will continue, and it will not. And therefore, we need to put in the processes that will ensure, even if there is a second wave, things will continue. And that is going to be only through coordination, which means that established communication channels have, for example, joint meetings with suppliers. Each person knows, quality management, it is told that we must have these daily morning meetings. Many companies hold this, but this, I think, now we should go out of the company and make sure that you have a morning meeting with suppliers, morning meeting with warehouses, morning meeting with people, this kind of a thing. I think that is going to be one of the biggest challenges. If we don't do it, we will definitely be affected very badly by the second wave.
Okay, one very quickly now, just one, one line. I want from each one of you one suggestion which will runs into just one line. Please, because we are short of time. Mr. Choudhury, one suggestion for the government.
Government is to go and spend on infrastructure and create more jobs.
Okay. Raj?
Treat logistics as an essential service and synchronize tightly with manufacturing on demand and supply both sides.
Okay. Mr. Gabhane?
More autonomy should be given to businesses, which will definitely help more and more employment opportunities in the country.
Dr. Nowal?
Government must play now offensive, means aggressive in spending instead of defensive by slogans.
And Professor Jayaraman?
Yeah, I think the government should now push for automation. It's the right time, and they should push for industry 4.0.
Wonderful. So I think our suggestions crisply at the end, you all have provided, I think, good food for thought. Since we mentioned logistics, Industrial Product Finder is doing a lot of features on logistics in the coming issue, material handling and equipment and logistics, etc. Auto components, pumps and valves, and are forthcoming just for your information. Our forthcoming webinar on Thursday includes construction technologies. So I think, yeah, technologies, like the panelists have mentioned, are here to stay. And like Professor Jayaraman also said, automation is there is no option kind of a situation. It is, you have to just step it up or accelerate it, whatever. So we have this, which can be of use to all of you. So I think that brings us to the end of our webinar. I must thank the panelists for their time and effort and putting so many aspects and perspectives on these challenges of running plants and restarting plants, which are actually taking a big grip now. The whole India, the country is now gripped with this issue of restarting, and I think we will do well. I think communicating. I think communicating to our employees, staff, people, workers, retaining them, let them know there is no uncertainty of what the steps are there. That there is an audit taking place. There are provisions for safety, like somebody mentioned about having a hospital medical services available, clarity of instructions, and a regular training program followed by checking. So I think everybody needs to get into a new habit, and that new habit will only come if we drill it down the chain. And I think that's what will ensure that we have a trouble-free situation. It is forecast that this infection might come back as a wave if we are not very careful. So we must be careful. So thank you, audience, for being with us, and stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you, panelists, and wonderful having this webinar.
Thank you very much. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.